Hello everyone, my name is Don, the movie reviewer, and today we are going to be talking about Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. This movie is written by Guillermo del Toro, and it's also co-written by Vanessa Taylor. I don't know who she is, I've never seen any of her previous work. But with Guillermo del Toro, I'm not a big fan of his. I haven't seen a majority of his movies. The one movie that I can say that is my favorite of his filmography is a movie called Cronos, starring a young Ron Perlman. And Cronos is a very weird kind of vampire-y movie, and I enjoyed it. Now, some of his newer stuff, like when I was a kid, Blade 2 was fun, and now that I'm an adult, I watch it, and I think it's really corny and cheesy. But it's fun. And some of it, like Pacific Rim, I thought that movie was entertaining and it was okay. But I didn't see any of his other movies like this, and I thought, his movies are okay. Like I would say, Guillermo del Toro is a director who has a keen visual eye and a style all of his own, just like Tim Burton. But just like Tim Burton, sometimes his style becomes played out. Now, is this the case with Guillermo del Toro and his new movie, The Shape of Water? Let's find out.
If I told you about her, the princess without voice, what would I say? When he looks at me, he doesn't know how I am incomplete. He sees me as I am. If I told you about her, what would I say? I wonder.
Eliza is a janitor at a government facility. One day, her world gets turned upside down when she encounters the amphibian man for the first time. How obvious is this movie? Everything that happens is 100% predictable, and if you don't know which way the story is headed, once the initial introduction of the movie begins, then you haven't seen movies before. This is a fantasy drama film, and the fantasy in here is handled well. It is perfectly executed. The visuals in here are breathtaking. It really sucks the viewer into this world that Guillermo del Toro has built. The story, on the other hand, is the main problem because it is predictable. You know exactly where it's going to go, and the movie is extremely obvious with what it's doing. There are scenes in here where the movie spells out exactly what's going to happen and what's going on and who to like and who to dislike. For example, there's a scene with Michael Shannon, and he comes into the bathroom. It's his introduction scene. He comes into the bathroom. There's this music playing, and it's like, here's the bad guy. And I just kind of cringed when I saw that stuff because, yeah, it's a fantasy, and so this is portrayed in an over-the-top manner. But then at the same time, it's being really obvious with who each person is and what's going on and how I'm supposed to feel. And it was too much for me. I wanted to tone it back a little bit. I really wanted the movie, to be more subtle than what it was. Even though that the things that were happening in here were obvious and not subtle at all, and the movie was predictable and it went on a path of predictability, I still had fun with it. I still enjoyed it. The music cues that, popped in during a moment where I was supposed to feel an intense emotion or a connection with a character to another character, I felt it because the music and the directing catered. And not only that, the performances in here are stellar because they definitely cater to the narrative of the plot that, like I said, is the way it is. And that's fine. But at the same time, I wish it would have done more with what it had instead of going down a familiar path. I think the story could have been executed better and told in a more subtle approach, but that's just me. One of the things that I hate about most movies from the past, present, and most likely in the future, and they always do this, is that there will be a moment of suspense taking place. And mind you, that the moment of suspense that's in this movie did get some emotion out of me because of the directing, because of its familiarity, and because of the performances that were in here. So all of these things coming into play really made the scene effective, but its familiarity is what bothered me, because it's like we see this all the time, and it's like in Terminator 2, for example. Like there's a scene in Terminator 2 where you got John Connor getting on his bike, he's trying to escape the T-1000, and then the bike won't start, and all of a sudden T-1000 shows up, and then boom, as soon as this T-1000 is like a hair away from killing John Connor, his bike starts up miraculously, and he just drives away. And there's a scene like that happens in this movie, and stuff like that to me is very irritating and frustrating. Sally Hawkins plays Eliza Esposito, and she is the main actor here. Her performance is magnetic. We immediately, in the opening act 1 of the movie, feel who her character is. You see that inner child within her spring out, and it consumes the viewer. It consumes the viewer who is watching, because she just caters this essence of love and joy and empathy with the character that she's portraying. Michael Shannon plays Richard Strickland, the main villain here. Michael Shannon is one of the greatest actors in the world. He deserves an Academy Award nomination for his performance in this movie. Michael Shannon. I don't see anyone else playing this character. As soon as Michael Shannon popped up on screen, I was like, it's my boy Michael Shannon. I love him. And he's such a mean, nasty character in this movie. He portrays like one of those old-fashioned Americans who is just strictly about the things that are most important in his life, and the other things that are below what's important mean nothing to him. But Michael Shannon and the way Guillermo del Toro directed him, you feel there's lots of gravitas with his character while he's on screen, and for the fact that it is played by Michael Shannon. Richard Jenkins plays Giles, and he was a character that I really wasn't interested in. There's like a little side plot going on with him in Act 2. There's an introduction to what his problem is in Act 1, and then they give kind of a conclusion to it in Act 2 that leads into another coincidence, which this movie has a lot of coincidences, leads into a coincidence of what he does by the end of the movie in Act 3 and why he does it. And his little side plot I thought was kind of unnecessary. It kind of just popped in here. I mean, there was an introduction to it, and it just led into like what he decides to do by the end. And it's just by chance and coincidence. And so I feel like the script just was like, hey, in order to keep the story going, we're going to give your character this little side plot in here, which goes nowhere. And it just feels like a sudden thing that happens in the movie. And so with Richard Jenkins, I thought his character was kind of adorable with the way he behaves. But with the story that he's given in here, it just seemed like he was used. Octavia Spencer plays Zelda Fuller, and Octavia Spencer, she proves in this movie why she is an Oscar caliber actress. Like, yeah, we see her in garbage films like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, and we think to ourselves, Why is this Oscar contender, this Oscar caliber actress in some garbage like this? And then in this movie, she proves exactly why she is an Oscar-nominated actress, because her performance in here is straightforward. It's like, okay, yeah, she's playing a person who is just, in janitorial services, and she just yaks up a storm, yap, and it goes on and on and on, and it is funny. It's not like hammy to the point of like, oh man, I'm so sick and tired of her repeating the same thing over and over again. It is actually funny, and it does give us a good it gives us good chemistry between Elsa, the main character, and Octavia Spencer's character in here, and they have good chemistry on screen together because it is believable as to the fact that yes, they could be friends in real life. Michael Stahlbarg plays Dr. Robert Hofstadter, and this guy, he's got an interesting side plot in this movie, which did keep me intrigued with all of the stuff that I didn't like in here with, the predictability and the not so subtle, like who this character is and all this stuff like that. Because as all that stuff was happening, when they show a little side plot with this character, I was saying to myself, oh, this is interesting. This could be a nice twist. And it goes down on the path of like, okay, it's interesting, and then it's overstaying its welcome, and then the reveal happens. It's like, oh, and then like it doesn't really lead anywhere. It's just like, oh, that was interesting at first, and then it just like kind of fizzles away into nothingness. Doug Jones, the star of the show, plays the Amphibian Man, and he kind of came off like the creature from the Black Lagoon in this movie. He's a movie monster. He's a movie monster, and his portrayal of the Amphibian Man in here was stellar. It was stellar. I love the makeup with him. I don't know if they had any special effects. I mean, clearly there were some special effects in here with like scenes of him in the tank and stuff, but just the makeup department in here, the special effects department, and Doug Jones himself delivered a monster who I felt empathy towards and that I was also afraid of. And so I think the mixture of like having a creature in here that is scary but also endearing was really well handled. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, even though its story is not very subtle with what it's doing and where the story is going, and it's obvious to what's happening, and it's a predictable movie. But the performance by everyone in here, Michael Shannon especially, fantastic. Loved this character, even though he's very nasty as a human being. Knew where he was coming from. Then you have the main actor in here, who's fantastic. She doesn't say a word. She's mute the whole time. And so she delivers good chemistry between her and Doug Jones. I like the special effects in here of showing the monster, and the scenes that did inject some emotion with me did work, even though the scenes were predictable and not very subtle with how they were handling what was happening and where it was going. I still had fun with it. Overall, I will give The Shape of Water an A-. I will give it an A- because, yes, the movie is 100% predictable. Everything that is happening on screen is bluntly obvious, and it's not very subtle. It's obvious to what's happening. It's obvious to like, here's the bad guy, here's the good guy, here's where the story's going, here's how this person feels, here's how that person feels. And a lot of it is entertaining. Like, for me, the first act of the movie was like, okay, I'm not really interested in this. And then the second half of the movie did get good, but it was the most interesting part Then the third half of the movie got intriguing, but then it went on a familiar path, and I was just like, oh, okay, I've seen this a million times before. And another thing that I will mention is that I felt the characters' chemistry in here wasn't deep enough. It wasn't as deep as I wanted it to be. Like, I didn't understand why the main character was so obsessed with the creature here. It's like I can understand why they came together, but to me it seemed like she was in a delusion of how she thought this creature felt about her. And I really wish the movie would have done that, to where it's like, yeah, she thinks one way about the situation, but then really it's going somewhere else, and it ends in a place where we don't expect. Whereas in this, it goes exactly where we think it's going to go, and it just didn't seem like it made sense. It just seemed like it was forced, and it was just there to be like, oh, here's this bizarre thing, and I didn't really get a deep connection with the two of them. And so I just felt like it was kind of like, oh, this is odd, and that's pretty much it. I didn't really feel any in-depth emotion between the two as to why they got together. I really wanted more between the two of them emotionally, especially with the creature. And the creature looks good. But yeah, other than that, I enjoyed it. It was good. I think a lot of people will love it. But it could have done more for me, and it could have been great, but it's only good. So as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.